Dear church, let's talk about navigating COVID. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley. Thank you for tuning in. I've got a couple of my co-workers with us today. Our Associate Minister, Blake Dozier. You might remember him formerly as our Youth Minister, Blake Dozier. Then we have Luke Burnham. Luke is our Youth Minister. And to prove it, Luke, I'm going to ask you to show your socks and your belt.
All right, I'm representing Thor on my socks, and I don't know what I'm doing on my belt.
Pokemon.
Oh, also Pokemon. Okay, there it is. Yep.
Yeah, well, thank you for dressing the part.
That's right.
And see,
That's
I've,
right.
I've graduated to just plain old Christmas socks.
When you leave the youth ministry, you have to graduate to different socks. That's just a rule. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for being here. Yeah, so what I wanted to talk about today is I wanted to take some of the discussions that we've been having in our office to the podcast. Now, I want to tell our folks that are watching or listening, we don't really have any concrete conclusions. We've just been discussing what navigating COVID looks like. What are we going to be like when we come out of this, if we ever come out of it? And what are some things that we can do in the meantime to help us get through it? And my hope is that the conversations that we've been having, that we share, maybe will be helpful to another congregation as well. So let's dive into that. One of the things that we've been talking about is, what is our goal? What are we going to try to do with this? What are we going to try to be on the other side of this? We know that things are going to look differently. We know that live streaming has kind of changed the game to some degree. What are we going to be when all this is over? What does that look like? Is the goal, I think you asked this question, is the goal to be back to absolutely 100% like we were before COVID? And is that even a realistic goal, right?
I mean, I think that's one of the big central questions that we're asking ourselves and wrestling with. I don't know that I've landed on a definitive answer. Maybe Luke has more insight than I do, but I mean, I think that's something we're going to be left to wrestle with for a while, honestly.
Yeah, coming into this, I was, before I took the youth ministry job, I spent 8 years teaching public school choir. And so I was in the middle of teaching right when this COVID situation hit. And as most people know, public schools were scrambling. They were trying to figure out what was going on. Many schools went virtual for several months, and that was it. And then after that, they kind of did a meeting in person kind of, but also a virtual model. But I mean, the end goal in education was, we've still got to teach the kids. We've still got to give them this education experience, whether for good or for bad. We still got to make sure they can pass these tests that they take at the end of the year. And so I think, looking at taking that experience and bringing it to the church and saying, well, what is our end goal? We at Oldham Lane love to say make and grow disciples. Well, can we still make and grow disciples in this new COVID virtual quasi atmosphere that we're going on? Can we still commune as the church and just kind of coming up with some strategies? What does that look like? Much like education, I think there's going to be things that we tried or will try, and we're going to say, oops, that was a huge mistake. Let's never do that again. And there's going to be things where we say, wow, why did we not do that in the past? This is how we're going to go on going forward. And I think it's just kind of, trying these different ideas and seeing what kind of reaction we can get, what kind of feedback. I think might be best for us.
I think one of the things that we have determined that I think we all agree on, and I think our elders would as well, is that if you are able to be in person, you should be in person. Mm-hmm. And I think that we all agree that live streaming cannot be a substitute for being together in person long term. Now, it's a great plan B, and it's a great adaptation when we're going through COVID, when, we can't gather, when we can't, when you're vulnerable, all those kind of things. And there are people who will continue to take advantage of the live stream because they're shut in. They can't be with us. Even before COVID, they couldn't be with us. And so we want to make that available. But I think we all agree that if you're in person everywhere else in life, you need to be in person at church. If you are not vulnerable, if you're able to be at church, you need to be at church. That it's not a good option for that. Right. But we've also talked about, so how do you force that? How do you approach that? How do you get people weaned off the live stream and back in person when they're fully capable of and need to be with us? How do you do that? Do you guilt them into it constantly? You constantly harp on it. Do you constantly talk about, hey, turn it off, come in? Do you guilt them into it? What do you do, right? So that's some of the things that we have talked about.
I think if anything, the COVID has maybe exposed a little bit of maybe where our hearts have, maybe that the metric that we have used for successful discipleship isn't necessarily spot on, because attendance is a big way that we track and mark that. And now we're looking, and people have kind of lost that checkbox mentality. Like we're going to attend just because that's what we do, because that's what a Christian does. Right. So now we've replaced listening to a sermon. You can listen to a sermon just as well from your living room.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so we can still check that box. Well, okay, so all along, for a long time now, maybe we've had a really unhealthy understanding of what it means to be part of the church. Because I really do believe we're seeing that presence is necessary, not to check a box, but to be part of a community. That's part of what we're called to as Christians, to contribute to a community and to benefit from the community that we are part of. So I think part of the solution here as we're wrestling with this is recognizing the importance of presence on some level and calling people to see the benefit of that.
Yeah.
To recognize that you're missing out on something if you're not participating in that, if you're not with us. Like, there's a real biblical and important element of your faith that's not there.
Yeah, when we, like a lot of churches, made the decision to kind of close our doors for a time until this settled down. And by the way, some people really took issue with that. Our folks did really well with it, but I've heard from others outside of our, congregation and other places that were really upset that certain churches, closed their doors to help flatten the curve, to be a good community member, to try to slow the spread. They always point to fear. We didn't close our doors because of fear. We closed our doors because people were dying. It was running rapidly through our congregation, maybe more so through ours than a lot of different congregations. And so we felt like that was the responsible thing to do. And I think it was a good decision. But maybe one of the after effects of that is that we gave people permission, obviously, to stay home and to watch online. And while that was a great tool, still is a great tool, the collateral damage of that is getting people back then to say, okay, the dust has settled, it's fine now. And some have taken the stance that we're just going to do away with the live streaming option. We're just going to wipe that out. And therefore you have to come back. Well, all the other churches that are doing live streaming, they just tune into one of those. And I don't agree with that stance, because there are still people that even before COVID needed it, that still need it now. And one of the blessings of Oldham Lane is we were doing live stream really well long before COVID hit. And so we actually grew during COVID because we had an opportunity to be in people's living room and engage people. So I don't think that that's the right tack to take. But at the same time, there's that balance there. And, we did it. I think we were right and wise in doing it. But now getting people back from it has proven to be quite a challenge. And some of the things that we've talked about are maybe we don't necessarily get too worked up about it. Maybe we use it to our advantage. I know you mentioned maybe a Zoom class that we can do for folks that maybe are still a little hesitant to come back.
Yeah. When we were discussing this, there's a tendency, pardon me, there's a tendency for some people to kind of, get this mentality, man, I've been coming for a year and so-and-so's staying home and they're the enemy. Why is this happening? I really think the leadership and the members need to kind of look at this as a good shepherd, one lost sheep situation. We want to include everybody in our fellowship. We believe our fellowship is the best place to be. We want to include them. So instead of saying, that they've had their chances, let's create an open environment. Let's create a very welcoming environment, and just see what different things we can try. I've been blessed. I've got my parents live in the Metroplex. My sister lives in Amarillo. My father-in-law goes to another church here in town. So I've been hearing all these different ideas from these other churches. So if you're in connection with some other church, it's kind of see what they've done, how they've reached out in this way. But one of the things that I have thought about is doing a Zoom class. It's kind of like live streaming, but there's actually some interaction. And just to be clear, this is for actual Bible class. This gives us a chance to have a smaller group setting, get some feedback. We did this a few Wednesday nights ago in our youth group class. We were just having a discussion of the Trinity, and I had my iPad on, and I set up the Zoom, and we had several teenagers join in, and I just set them right at the table, and I said, all right, here's the group discussion. Let's participate. And, some people just treated it like live stream, where they just sat there and just listened and didn't really do other things. But other kids were able to get into the discussion, have some great comments, and continue learning. And that's what, if our goal is we want to grow our disciples, I think that's an excellent strategy to try. You don't have to use Zoom. Microsoft Teams does this. There's several other software platforms that offer this solution. Google Meet. So check one out that might work for your situation.
What I like about that approach is, we've kind of identified one of the issues is when we're sitting in our living room passively consuming material, we're not engaging in community the way that we think is important. So we're missing some of the benefit of community. And so that's a way to look at technology and say, okay, how can I use this tool in a way that helps bridge the gap and moves us closer to where we feel like we need to be long term? And I think that's the real challenge ahead of us in these times is, I don't think pulling the plug on technology is the right response, but how do we use it in a really deliberate fashion where we're not just mindlessly wandering through this digital world, but we keep our goals and our purposes in front of us.
Yeah.
And we're heading in a direction. And I think we've identified the direction is, someday we want to be back together.
Right.
Presence is important. Community is the direction that we're headed towards this. So how do we use technology? How do we communicate in a way that lifts people up and encourages them, where we're not beating them over the head all the time with get back in church, get back in church, get back in church.
Right.
But where we're saying, okay, this is a tool, and we're using this tool to direct you back towards where you need to be, because this is best. This is where we were designed to flourish and thrive. This is best for us.
COVID or no COVID, that should be the goal.
Yeah.
Even if COVID never came along,
right,
we should always have that goal of, our mantra at Oldham Lane is make and grow disciples. How do we do that with technology?
Right.
That should always be our goal. I don't think we're going to get too far by constantly laying a guilt trip on people. It's kind of like the old saying among preachers is that, you lead people to pasture, but they got to eat.
Right.
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. It's not our job to make them drink. It's our job to lead them to the water, So I don't think that we're going to accomplish a whole lot by just guilting people into things. Right. But I do think that, whether it's the Zoom class or sermons on the live stream or whatever it is that we're doing technology wise, is encouraging people that, it's a good plan B. And for some, it's a plan A, but it's a good plan B. But ultimately, the best plan is, if you're able, is to be here. Because one of the things that I think gets lost, and you brought this up in a sermon recently, and I've never really thought about this, is sitting at home and watching it on the live stream for a while was our only option.
Right.
Now, if you're able to be in person, or if you're in person in every other area of life, I think personally you should be in person when it comes to worship. But the other thing that you brought up that I never really thought about is, just worshiping from home, you're not with your church family, which is important. All those one another's that Paul talks about, they can't happen on your sofa. But the other thing that you brought up was, are you really serving? Are you digging in and serving when you're home? Some may be picking up the phone and calling people or checking on folks and trying to serve in ways like dropping off food at the doorstep and leaving it for people. But by and large, are we really serving?
Right.
Are you, because I think that's a missing element too, that, when we come together, that's something that's more prevalent, something that we find easier to do. We have a platform to do it, but we're missing out on other aspects of the church that you brought up that I'd never really thought about.
And truthfully, whether you're because of your situation stuck at home, and this is your plan A because it's all that available, or whether you can meet in person and you're there every time the door opens, are you going to be a passive consumer or a contributor?
Right.
I mean, we're called to contribute. And so I think that's an important mentality that we have to encourage our members to get right is, this isn't about just sitting down and absorbing a sermon or a Bible class.
Right.
This is about meaningful membership in a community. And that means that there's give and take.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned is maybe having, when we're able, because cases are on the rise here right now as they are everywhere. But when we're able to have maybe once a quarter, once a month, a big fellowship activity church-wide, so that, that might be a way to kind of integrate people back, make them feel like, okay, we're doing some fun stuff now. So aside from tuning in on Sunday morning and getting the worship aspect of it, there's fellowship things happening that, you don't want to miss out on. Come and be a part of that. I talk a little bit about that. I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, it was kind of inspired a few months ago. When my summer youth activities slowed down, I just put on the calendar, let's have a men's game night. Yep. And I just invited men from across the board, across the congregation. Hey, bring dominoes, bring cards. Let's have some fun for a few hours, once a month. And I love doing that because I got to know some guys that I thought I knew at the church, but, sitting there interacting. There's nights where the night will be 2.5 hours, but we're just sitting there for an hour, just fellowshipping, catching up, bearing each other's burdens. And it was just an excellent experience. And so anything that we can do to increase that, if we can have a church-wide fellowship, and even if, let's call it a volleyball night, maybe volleyball's not your thing. Well, you can come and you can help with the food. You can come and you can help watch the little 3-year-olds who have no idea what's going on with volleyball, but, they like trying to run into traffic. So you're going to help them not do that. There's a place for everybody at the church, and just that different atmosphere. Fellowship, a meaningful growing together of believers. That is one of the big reasons that we have the church. In America, we're very individualistic, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, make a way for yourself. But the early church, that was not anywhere on their radar. Their idea was, we have got to come together, we have got to survive together, and essentially we are saved together. Yep. Many of them understood this belief that you are saved together as the church. There's not this one person on the outlier getting their soul salvation. We come together as a church to grow closer to Jesus. And we that believe that and we that understand that, we just want to continue to encourage everyone. And so, I love coming together and singing. I love coming together and hearing a good message. But then sometimes just coming together and doing an activity that's not overtly spiritual is going to have lots of spiritual repercussions and just help our group grow together.
Yeah, because I think there's a reconnecting that's going to have to happen everywhere, not just at Oldham Lane. We grew during COVID because of our live streaming services. We also do a television program that airs weekly on Sunday mornings at 10 o'clock here in this area. And we had a lot of people that were tuning in because, our folks that do the live streaming have done it well for so long. We had people tuning in, and we grew during COVID. So we gained a lot of new members, but also we've been disconnected for so long. There's going to have to be a reconnection. We always talk about hitting the restart button after COVID and kind of starting over. Well, that's one way that we're going to have to do some starting over, is we're going to have to reconnect, get to know each other again as a family. Our college minister has twin boys that are 2 years old. They were born during COVID. And he and his wife were lamenting the fact that they don't know how to sit still in church. Well, they've never been to church. They were born during COVID. This is completely new to them. And there's others like that were just coming into the church when COVID hit. Adults that became Christians or that came to Oldham Lane from somewhere else that were just getting used to us and our culture that, COVID kind of put a halt to all that. And so there is that reconnection that's going to have to happen. And maybe we can kind of slide into that with, Zoom meetings, still using our live stream to incorporate folks and getting them, encouraging them to, okay, when it's time, let's come back. Let's have some fellowship activities to reconnect. Let's do some things that we can get on the same page with one another, you know.
I guess Luke and I, of course, we obviously both have a youth ministry background.
Yeah.
But, you know, we see it in kids. They need to have fun together.
Yeah.
I mean, they really do. It's, I mean, youth ministry is not all about fun and games. So I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But what we thrive when we have fun together. That's when we learn about each other and build our friendships. And as a church, we have to figure out how to do that again.
We do.
Is just enjoy being together.
Yeah.
And I think that's gonna prove fruitful long term and getting us to where we need to be is investing in those relationships.
I agree.
And exactly what that's going to look like, I don't have a definitive answer at this point. But technology has to be a tool that we use to get ourselves that direction.
Yeah, and you know, kind of building on that, we've got a buddy that goes to church with us, Clinton. He was talking with his coworkers, talking about how he had recently had a game night with some church friends over at his house, and he was just talking. One of his coworkers asked, "Oh, what were y'all drinking?" "Oh, we don't drink alcohol." "How can you have fun without alcohol?" And he said, "Well, come on over this weekend and you can find out." Invited him over, alcohol-free, great evening. And the guy had more questions. He wanted to learn more about this because this was just foreign to him. So, you know, there are ways where we can have fun and we can do not just a Bible study, and we can bring people closer to Jesus. We can live that life that Jesus wanted for those believers. So, you know, if we can use that as one of our many tools to help our church continue to grow and make further disciples, let's do it.
Yeah, one of the questions that we have asked, that I've asked myself many times, is this futile? I mean, do we really want to get back to normal? Is that even possible? Like, when this whole COVID pandemic hit, one of the first things that I thought was, you know what, we're going to come out of this even better. We're going to come out of this better than ever, stronger than we've ever been. I'm just not so sure about that. You know, as the church overall, maybe at Oldham Lane, maybe at your congregation, but overall, I'm not sure that that's going to be the case. I'm not sure that we're going to come back stronger and better than ever. I think this is going to wane. I think it's going to hang on for a long time. I'm not trying to be pessimistic. And so I've asked the question of myself, and I know we've talked about it in our meetings, is this an effort in futility? Do we need to change our expectation? Do we need to, you know, go in a different direction when it comes to this? I mean, do we just need to accept that we've got an online audience now, and let's just try to reach them and, you know, try to cater to them in whatever way possible? Or, you know, what is the long-term outlook for the church, and what does normal look like? Because we know it's going to be different.
I guess I just grew up with this and I'm old school, but my knee-jerk response to all of this is, let's just get back to how it was.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just inside. That's how
Me
I
too.
want it to be. Let's just get back to how it was. I want it exactly like it was.
Yep.
Let's serve communion like it was. Let's sing the songs that we used to sing.
Right.
I want it to be like it was. And I think the reason I'm drawn to that is because how it was really good for our family for a lot of years.
Mm-hmm.
The rhythm, I mean, we were a go to church 3 times a week family.
Yeah.
That rhythm of in our daily lives has been key to forming relationships that are so valuable to us. Yeah. I mean, that has those traditional ways of the traditional patterns of doing things have been very fruitful to us.
Yes.
So I look at it and I see my experience, and I want to get back to that. I think we need to be slow to move away from that. Mm-hmm. That has been, so I mean, there's an element of me that says, let's scrap all this new talk and let's do the old things. I think we have to discern, I mean, what is the shift that's really happening? How can we keep those principles, the foundational purposes of who we are in place, and kind of use this new cultural situation that we're in, adapt to it in a way that meets the needs of people, but doesn't take us in an unbiblical direction. And mean, in looking at my life, community, friendships, that presence, that's what has made showing up to church 3 times a week so valuable for us. I think if people see that, church attendance will change.
Yeah.
People may not see that if we don't use technology to show them. People may not see that if we don't have social activities to engage them. 3 times a week church attendance is not the goal.
Right. Right.
And that's maybe where
It's
my
always been the goal. Yeah. It's always been the goal, it seems like.
I mean, that's maybe where my default lands, but that is not the goal. I think that's what you'll see when you love being together.
Yeah.
But
It's a
not,
result.
It's not the goal. It's the result.
No, I agree with you. I think I'm with you because at least at Oldham Lane, the old way is proven.
Yeah.
You know, it's not to say that there's not a better way to do it, but the old way is proven. So I'm with you. I also think that we need to redeem the time and use it to our advantage. However, I do think also that we can come out of this different. You know, I think that one thing that COVID has done for the church is it's allowed us to maybe come back different. I know some other churches have done some things differently with their Sunday nights and Wednesday nights. You know, they kind of looked at the reset as an opportunity to, you know, change some things. And I think that's good within reason, obviously.
Right.
I know of churches that decided, you know, on Sunday nights, they're going to change kind of their format and how they do things. Same with Wednesday night.
Yeah.
I think that's good. But I'm with you. I tend to default to the way it was because, I mean, the way it was good.
Yeah.
It was good. And I tend to think that the way it was is better than staying at home.
Well, and I would say the way it was good, but also, like we said at the beginning, maybe some exposure has happened through COVID of where the weaknesses were in the way that it was.
Yeah.
So, I mean, checklist has never been right. Church attendance has never been the metric.
Right.
And so I do think this is a little bit of a refining by fire situation. COVID has been difficult. It's not going to look the same on the other side. I think on one hand, you've assessed it correctly. On the other hand, maybe God is preparing us and helping us discern, okay, y'all need to see some of your shortcomings. And so there is an element that we need to respond to that. We probably do need to change some things. I just think we need to change slow and be careful and discern as we're doing so.
I agree. Yeah.
You know, I'll play a little bit of the flip side of the coin. You know, when I was in education, even before COVID, there was this growing number just across the country of, we had more and more kids that were, you know, in public school, but they were doing remote college classes, or they were taking these extra classes, and more of it was becoming where I'll be in the comfort of my own place and I'll still have access to what we used to meet together as a group. Well, this is growing, you know, good or bad, this is happening more and more. And then COVID just like blew it up and created all these virtual resources and created all these companies to go out of their way to provide this. So there is a generation that is coming up that is used to sitting in the same spot, being at their computer and getting a lot of their resources, whether they're working from home, whether they're buying things online from home, whether they're viewing their entertainment from home. That's kind of what's going on. You know, I think about youth ministry 50 years ago. How many churches did we know that had youth ministry or a youth minister? You know, it wasn't very popular, but we had this idea, hey, you know, the youth need to be reached a little bit differently. If we can have a person on staff or a really dedicated volunteer that can teach these specific classes, that can put together these activities that really focus on our youth and show the youth the importance of growing as a Christian, they can mature their faith, they can find something that's going to really reach them, and then they're going to become better equipped believers. Who knows? 20, 30 years down the path, maybe we're going to have some sort of minister or some sort of deacon or volunteer that, you know, their main job is how do we interact. See, I think interaction is a big thing because, you know, staring at a screen, that's not church. You know, that's a TED Talk right there. Yeah. Okay. You're not growing with the audience members or the speaker of a TED Talk by sitting there listening. You know, we've got to have that interaction. So maybe we're going to have a new type of ministry that specifically reaches out and interacts with and has these virtual fellowship options or schedule certain activities that can reach out to those who are more comfortable doing that. You know, I don't want to say that's bad. I will say it's going to be different. And, asking somebody 50 years about youth ministry, that could have been the end of the world, depending who you talk to. But here we are, we change. And I just kind of, when I'm thinking about this question, what is COVID doing to us? How is it changing us? Well, I just go back to, the book of Acts, the Bible. Christians were meeting then nothing like how we're meeting now. Yeah. Things have changed over the years with technology and with culture and with time. And so I don't want to give up hope. I want to be really encouraged. It's going to look different, but I don't think that's necessarily bad. I think we can keep growing and making disciples even in this landscape.
That's why we're glad he's on staff.
That's right.
It keeps us in check.
He does. Because I do think there's a silver lining in all this. At least we can speak from our experiences that we grew during COVID, and we are finding out that there are a lot of people that have come our way, some that have even stayed, that had really no church background, or they hadn't been to church in a long time. Maybe they were disenchanted with church, but during COVID, they tuned into the television program, and it sparked their interest. And they've come our way. So I think there's a blessing and curse thing working there, but there's definitely a blessing. We have seen it. We have seen people come our way because of it, and I think that's more than enough reason to continue to do it. Yeah. And I think we just continue to, push that it's a good plan B. But if you can be here, this is the best plan, is to be in person. Yeah,
as you preached just the other night, or maybe I was listening to one of Blake's old sermons, but, Jesus created the church. We're not going to replace the church. It is so vitally important. So we got to keep pushing that, keep believing that. Church might look a little bit different century to century, but we got to come together.
Yeah, I think anybody would have to admit that while it was convenient to be at home, I mean, look, I don't ever get to worship with my family hardly. They're off. My kids are off at school and all that. When college got closed and they came home, they didn't go back after spring break. For the first few weeks, that was nice to be on the couch with my family, worshiping together. That hadn't happened in a while. But even then, I knew this isn't the best option. This isn't what's best for me and my family. I think we all know the convenience is nice, or it was nice. But at the end of the day, I think we all knew this isn't an equivalent. And so anyway, thank you guys. Appreciate you so much tuning in. We'd like to hear from you if you have been talking about these same kind of things and you have comments, or if you have questions about today's episode, you can email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. I'll make sure that these two guys see the email as well if you have a specific question for them. As always, please spread the news about the podcast. We're on the main platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, of course, Facebook and YouTube. Let people know about us. And again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you guys for joining me. Appreciate you guys being here. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.